The first tiers, the space station cafe, was crowded and noisy. Lights flickering above metal walls, engines humming far away. Different alien species filled the tables, their voices mixing in strange sounds and laughter. In the middle of it all sat one human, calm, silent, and different from everyone else. Across from him sat an alien girl, her eyes wide and curious, her silver skin glowing faintly in the dim light. She had agreed to meet him here after a long day of travel. But now her heart felt heavy. The human was eating in such a strange way, holding shiny tools in his hands, carefully cutting his food. He did not reach out to share with her. He did not lean closer. He did not follow the warmth of her people's traditions. In her culture, sharing food was a sacred act. It meant trust, closeness, even affection. To eat alone or to keep food to yourself was seen as cold and distant, almost insulting. The alien girl's lips trembled. She lowered her gaze, and before she could stop it, tears welled in her eyes. She tried to hide them, turning her head, pretending to look at the glowing stars through the cafe's glass window, but the tears slid down anyway, shining on her cheeks like tiny crystals. Her people would have understood her pain. They would have comforted her, but this human, he just kept eating quietly. She felt invisible, unwanted, and her chest ached around them. Other aliens whispered, some with mocking smiles. "Humans are heartless," one said under his breath. "They don't know how to show love," another laughed. The alien girl's hands curled into fists, her tears dropping faster. She believed them. She thought maybe they were right. The human lifted his eyes then, calm and steady, and noticed the shimmer of her tears. He paused, knife and fork in hand, and tilted his head slightly as if trying to understand. For a long moment he said nothing, and that silence only made her cry more. Finally, he placed the tools down gently on the table, the clink of metal against metal breaking the air. "You are crying," he said softly, his voice low but firm. The alien girl looked at him, her chest rising and falling, her throat tight. "Yes," she whispered, "because your ways are strange. They hurt me. They make me feel like nothing to you." The human blinked slowly, his expression unreadable. He leaned back, his eyes never leaving hers, as if searching for something deep inside. "Strange," he repeated quietly, almost to himself. Then he picked up a small piece of food with his fork, turned it toward her, and held it out across the table. The alien girl froze, her tears still running, her hands trembling. She did not understand. Was this an apology or just another strange human act? Her heart pounded. Her mind was torn between anger and confusion. Should she accept it, or should she push it away to protect her pride? The other aliens around the cafe kept watching, their whispers louder. Some mocked, some scoffed, some leaned forward in curiosity. The tension grew, like a storm pressing against the windows of the cafe. The alien girl's tears blurred her vision, but through the blur she saw something different in his eyes. Not coldness, not greed, but something softer, something patient, something she could not name yet. Her hand lifted slowly, almost against her will, her fingers brushing the offered food. The human did not move, did not push her, did not demand. He simply waited. His calmness was strange, his silence heavy, but also steady like a rock. The alien girl's tears slowed, her breathing uneven. She pulled her hand back at the last moment, shaking her head, unable to accept. Her pride was too strong, her culture too deeply rooted, but inside a small doubt was born. A question that would not leave her heart, maybe, just maybe. The human's strange ways meant something else, something she had yet to see. The human placed the food back on his own plate, not offended, not angry. He simply gave a small nod, as if he understood more than he spoke. The alien girl wiped her tears quickly, embarrassed by her weakness, but when she glanced at him again, she saw the same steady eyes watching her, and deep inside she felt a flicker of warmth. Confusing, painful, but real. The cafe noise grew louder, laughter and clattering around them, but for her time slowed. Caught between tears and questions, her heart whispered a single thought, one that scared her more than anything. This human is strange, but maybe he cares. And with that, the first tears of misunderstanding turned into the beginning of something far greater. The alien girl could not sleep that night. Her heart was restless, her mind spinning with confusion. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the human's calm face, his steady gaze, his strange way of offering food. Why did he act like that? So different from her people, so cold yet so steady. She pressed her hands against her chest, feeling the faint beat of her heart, and tears rose again. Her people had always taught her that love was shown openly, through touch, through sharing, through warm words, but the human did none of that, and yet something in his silence lingered with her. The next day, they walked together through the crowded market of the space station. The air was filled with bright lights, alien scents, and the shouts of traders. The alien girl watched as the human examined items with sharp eyes, his hands behind his back, never rushing. When a merchant offered him fruit, the human shook his head, his voice calm but firm. "Too much," he said, refusing the price. The alien girl's mouth fell open. Shocked, in her culture, bargaining was an insult, a way of saying you did not respect the work of the seller. She gasped softly, her chest tightening. Did he truly have no shame? No respect, no heart, the merchant hissed, muttering under his breath about humans. Other customers turned to look, whispering and smirking. The alien girl's face burned, tears pricking her eyes again. She wanted to pull him away, to tell him he was embarrassing her, but the human stood tall, his arms folded, unshaken. Finally, the merchant gave up, lowering the price, and the human calmly placed a few coins on the table. The alien girl's heart cracked. She thought he was greedy, selfish, even cruel to her. Love was generosity, giving more than asked, showing kindness in the open. But here he was holding back, counting every coin. Her tears fell quietly. Hidden behind her hands when they left the stall, she whispered, her voice trembling. "You are cold, you are unkind. You only think of yourself." The human stopped walking, turning to face her, his brow furrowing slightly. "Is that what you think?" he asked, his voice steady. The alien girl's tears grew heavier. She nodded, unable to stop them. "Yes, because in my world one gives extra. One shows care by giving more. You only take. You only save." For a long moment, the human said nothing. His face showed no anger, no insult, only silence. He simply looked at her, and then turned away, continuing to walk. Her heart broke more. She thought her words had pushed him further away. But then, as they turned into a narrow alley of the market, she saw something that froze her in place. The human had stopped near a corner, where a poor alien child sat on the floor, thin, trembling, with empty hands, without a word. The human knelt down, placing the same coins he had saved into the child's palms. The child's eyes widened, glowing with sudden hope, tears of joy falling down its cheeks. The human gave a small nod and walked on. Not looking back, the alien girl stood there stunned, her tears spilling even faster, but for a different reason. She realized she had been wrong, completely wrong. His bargaining was not greed. It was protection. He saved not for himself, but for those who had nothing. He did not show his kindness with loud words or open gestures. He hid it, quiet and unseen, and that truth hit her harder than any insult, harder than any pain. She ran to catch up with him, her heart beating fast, her tears soaking her cheeks. "Why did you not tell me?" she cried softly. "Why did you not say you gave to the child?" The human glanced at her, his eyes calm as always. "Because love is not for display," he said, his voice like a steady river. "It is for action." The alien girl stopped, her body trembling, her mind caught between shame and awe. She had misunderstood him. She had judged him too quickly. Her people loved with words, with warm touches, with visible gifts, but humans, or at least this human, loved differently. They loved through quiet strength, through actions that asked for no praise. The market noise filled the air again, traders shouting, coins clattering, laughter echoing, but inside her chest silence grew heavy and warm. She wiped her tears, but they would not stop, because these tears were no longer only of pain. They were tears of awakening, of seeing something she had never understood before. As they walked side by side, she kept glancing at him, her heart whispering new words. This human is strange, but maybe his strangeness hides love. The alien girl sat quietly across from him again, this time on a bench overlooking the station's artificial garden. Strange trees swayed in the recycled air, and a soft, warm light above made it feel like sunset. She held a small glowing fruit in her hands, but she didn't eat. Her thoughts were heavy, her chest still unsure. The human sat beside her, silent as always, his gaze watching the garden. He didn't speak unless necessary, didn't smile often, didn't reach out to comfort her. Yet something about his presence was no longer cold. It was steady like a rock that never moved. Even when storms passed over it, the alien girl broke the silence, her voice soft, unsure. "Why do you act so strange, human?" He turned his head slightly, meeting her eyes without blinking. "How so?" he asked. "You speak so little. You don't share food the way we do. You don't show kindness like others." He stayed quiet for a long moment, and she feared he wouldn't answer. But then he looked away. His eyes focused on the sky above on Earth. He said slowly, "We learned to survive by being careful. In war and hunger, in betrayal, we couldn't afford to show weakness." His voice was calm, but underneath it, she heard something heavy, something old. He wasn't just explaining his culture. He was remembering pain. "Kindness," he continued, "was dangerous when shown to the wrong person. So we learned to show it with actions, not words." The alien girl held her fruit tighter, her throat dry. "Your people sound so hurt," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "We are," he said, "but we still try to love." She looked down at the grass beneath her feet. Artificial but soft. She remembered how her people danced during meals, how they sang when sharing gifts. To them, love was celebration, open and bright. But now she saw another side, a love hidden in silence, in steady eyes and quiet acts of protection. "I thought you were cold," she said gently. "But maybe you're just quiet because your heart is loud." He gave a small nod, and that simple movement meant more to her than any poem. A breeze passed through the garden, and with it came the sound of a child crying in the distance. The human stood up immediately, scanning the direction without hesitation. The alien girl followed him as he moved toward the sound. They found a young alien boy stuck between the roots of a decorative tree, his leg caught in a gap. Many walked past, some paused but did nothing. But the human knelt down, speaking calmly to the boy. He didn't panic, didn't shout, just worked slowly, gently freeing the leg without causing pain. The boy looked up at him with wide eyes, then ran off without a word. The alien girl stood frozen, her eyes on the human. He dusted off his hands and turned back to her as if nothing had happened. "You didn't know him," she said softly. "No," he replied. "Then why help?" "Because someone should," he answered. Her heart ached again. But this time it was not confusion. It was something closer to respect. He didn't act kind to be seen. He didn't wait for thanks. He simply acted because to him, that was what love meant. It was not loud, not grand, not performed for others. It was silent, powerful, and honest. Back at the garden bench, she sat beside him once more. She didn't ask any more questions. She only observed the way he breathed calmly, the way he stayed still but always alert. There was a rhythm to him, a quiet pattern that she had never noticed before. She started to see him differently, not as a strange outsider, but as a being shaped by hardship, yet still willing to be good. After a while, she held out her fruit toward him, a small offering in her culture, a gesture of trust. He looked at it, then gently took it from her hands and placed it back into hers. "I've already eaten," he said, "but thank you." She didn't cry this time. Instead, she smiled, the smallest smile, and looked up at the lights above the garden. Something inside her had changed. The human's way was strange. Yes, but now she saw it clearly. It was not coldness, it was quiet warmth, hidden beneath layers of silence, and it was starting to melt her heart. The market was alive with color and noise. Floating lights buzzed over stalls. Alien sellers shouted in many languages, and sweet smells drifted through the recycled air. It was the busiest place on the station, and also the most chaotic. The alien girl walked beside the human, her eyes moving from one stall to another. Curious but nervous, he walked calmly, his hands in his pockets, his eyes scanning everything like a soldier walking through a war zone. She wanted to enjoy this trip, she really did. But something inside her still felt unsure, still felt too soft. She had started to understand his ways, his silence, his calm, his quiet actions. But in public, everything still felt wrong. They stopped at a spice stall, one that sold glowing powders and rare herbs. The merchant was a tall, golden-skinned creature with 4 arms and a wide smile. "Ah, human alien girl. Try this," he said, holding out a sample. The girl took a deep breath. The scent reminded her of home, of warmth, of family. She turned to the human with hope in her eyes, but he didn't reach out to taste it. Instead, he asked coldly, "How much?" The merchant smiled wider. "For you, 5 credits, 2. The human replied without emotion. The merchant laughed. "You joke." The human stayed silent, his face unreadable. The alien girl's smile faded. Her shoulders tensed. She glanced around. People were watching again. Other aliens whispered, shaking their heads. He insults the merchant, someone said. Typical human. Another muttered. Her cheeks burned with shame. She wanted to pull him away, to stop this scene from getting worse. But the human stood still, not angry, not rude, just firm. The merchant finally sighed and dropped the price. 3 credits, final offer. The human nodded, paid, and turned away as they walked on. The alien girl couldn't hold it in anymore. Why do you always do that? She whispered, her voice shaking. Do what? He asked. Push people, argue over coins, make scenes. The human didn't answer right away. He looked ahead, watching the crowd, then finally said, I don't argue, I negotiate. To my people? That's disrespect, she said, tears forming in her eyes again. Respect doesn't mean overpaying, he replied calmly. But it means showing care, showing trust, she said. He stopped walking and turned to her, his expression still calm but serious. And what if I told you I use those saved coins to feed someone else? She blinked. Heart pounding. You do. Sometimes, he said. Not always, but when I can. She looked down, guilt creeping into her chest, but her pride still spoke louder. You should explain yourself then. I don't need to, he replied. Not everything needs to be seen. Her tears spilled again. This time out of frustration. She felt like she was always chasing understanding. Always behind everything he did made her question her own ways. He didn't act like her people, didn't express himself like they did, and yet, she couldn't deny that his quiet actions had meaning. They passed by a stall selling toys made from light and crystal. A small alien child stood near it, eyes full of longing. The human noticed the child, stopped, and without a word, bought a glowing ring toy from the merchant. He crouched and handed it to the child, who gasped and hugged it tightly. No thanks were given, no big speech was made. The human just nodded once and kept walking. The alien girl watched it all with wide eyes. Her throat tightened again, but this time the tears came from a different place. She was starting to see the full picture. Not just his strange habits, but the heart hidden beneath them. She walked faster to catch up, walking beside him in silence. They reached a quiet spot near the end of the market, where a fountain hummed with recycled water. She sat down slowly, her hands trembling. I judged you again, she whispered. The human said nothing, simply sat beside her. I'm sorry, she added, her voice breaking. He looked at her, his eyes still calm. You're learning, he said. That's enough. She wiped her tears with her sleeve. I don't understand how you care so much, yet stay so quiet. Because real care doesn't need an audience, he answered. She let those words sit in the air between them, and slowly they started to make sense. Maybe love wasn't loud. Maybe it didn't need grand gestures or public shows. Maybe it was in the little things. The coin saved, the toy gifted, the steady presence. Her world had always taught her to love with colors, noise, and warmth, but this human, he loved with silence, shadows, and steady steps, and for the first time she didn't want to change him. She just wanted to understand him more. The corridors near the edge of the space station were dim and quiet. The bright lights and loud markets were far behind now. Here shadows stretched along the walls, and strange echoes followed every step. The alien girl walked close to the human, her hands folded tightly in front of her. They had taken this path as a shortcut back to the ship, but something didn't feel right. The air felt heavier, and the lights above flickered more often. She glanced around nervously, her eyes scanning corners, doorways, and dark hallways. Are we safe here? She whispered. Yes, the human said calmly without stopping. But keep walking. His voice was steady, but his hand slowly moved toward the side of his jacket. He wasn't afraid, but he was alert. A low sound echoed behind them, footsteps, too many, too close. The alien girl's heart raced, and she turned her head. 3 tall figures stepped out of the shadows, their eyes glowing faintly under their hoods. One of them smirked, showing sharp yellow teeth. Well, well, he said, a human and his little alien pet. The girl's breath caught, and she took a step back. The human placed his arm in front of her, blocking her gently. We don't want trouble, he said firmly. Too late, the tallest one replied, pulling a small energy blade from his coat. You walk into our zone. You pay the price, the alien girl whispered. Let's run. But the human didn't move. Instead, he took a step forward. Calm and unshaken, his hand stayed empty, but his voice grew colder. You don't want to do this. The thugs laughed, circling them slowly. Human courage, one sneered. Let's see how long it lasts, and then, without warning, they charged. The alien girl screamed, stepping back. But the human was faster than she had ever seen him. He dodged the first attacker with ease, grabbing the thug's wrist and twisting it until the blade dropped. In one fluid motion, he kicked the second one in the knee, making him collapse with a groan. The third reached for her, but the human moved between them like a wall. He punched the last attacker hard in the stomach, knocking the breath out of him. All three thugs staggered back, holding their injuries. But the human didn't chase them, didn't shout, didn't brag. He simply stood there, guarding her, his chest rising and falling slowly. The attackers looked at each other, then ran off into the shadows without a word. The alien girl fell to her knees, shaking. She hadn't expected that, not the speed, not the skill, and definitely not the silence. She looked up at the human as he turned toward her. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly. She shook her head, eyes wide. You fought for me." He knelt beside her and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I told you," he said. "I protect those I care about." Her throat tightened, and fresh tears filled her eyes. "But you didn't even look scared." "I was," he said simply. "But fear doesn't stop me." She stared at him, truly seeing him now not just as the quiet, strange human with odd habits, but as someone who moved like a soldier, thought like a protector, and acted without hesitation. She realized he hadn't just protected her body. He had protected her pride, her honor, her safety in a world she barely understood. They sat in silence for a long time, the hum of the station surrounding them. Then she whispered, "I thought love had to be soft, full of warm words and pretty gifts." He looked at her with those deep, quiet eyes. "It can be," he said, "but sometimes love is standing between danger and someone else." Her tears finally fell, but not out of fear or shame. These were tears of understanding, of seeing him fully for the first time. She reached out and touched his hand. It was rough, calloused, and scarred, but strong, real, and steady. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. He nodded once. "Always." They walked back in silence. The path now empty, but something had changed. Not just around them, but between them. The space that once held misunderstanding was now filled with quiet respect. And though she still didn't fully understand every part of his world, she knew one thing clearly. This human would never let harm touch her as long as he stood. The alien girl couldn't sleep. Even after they reached the ship and the door locked behind them, her heart kept pounding. She sat on the edge of her bunk, hands folded tightly, eyes staring at the metal floor. Images of the attack flashed again and again. His calm eyes, his fast hands, his quiet strength. It all made sense now, but also raised more questions. Why did he know how to fight like that? Why did he never speak about his past? What had happened to make him this silent and careful? The human sat at the ship's table, cleaning a small metal tool with a cloth. The lights were dim, and the engine hum was the only sound in the air. He looked peaceful, but too peaceful, like someone who had spent a long time learning to hide pain. She walked toward him slowly, her voice low. "Can I ask something?" He looked up and nodded. She hesitated, then sat across from him. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" The cloth in his hands stopped moving for a moment. He didn't look away, but his eyes changed. Just a little. "War," he said simply. She froze. "Your world is at peace now." He gave a small nod. "Now yes, but not always." She leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Were you a soldier?" The human didn't answer right away. Instead, he placed the cloth down and looked at the small light blinking on the wall. "I was something like that," he finally said. "But not for a country or a flag." "Then for what?" she asked. "For survival." Her chest tightened. He wasn't just someone who had trained to fight. He had lived in a world where he had to. "I don't understand," she said gently. He leaned back in the chair, his hands resting on the table. "After the climate fell apart, food was rare," he began. "Cities broke down, systems collapsed. I was born in one of the rough zones, no rules, no safety, no help." Her heart ached as she listened. "You were just a child, we all were," he said. "And we had to grow up fast. I learned to fight before I could read, learned to hide before I could trust." "Was there no one to protect you?" she asked. "Only us," he said. "We protected each other, or we died." Tears touched her eyes again, not because of confusion this time, but because she was finally beginning to understand the core of him. His silence wasn't coldness, it was survival. His strength wasn't pride, it was memory. I always thought love meant showing everything, she said. But maybe you've never been allowed to show anything at all. The human gave a soft smile. The first real one she had seen since they met. You're not wrong, he said. It took me a long time to even believe love was real. But you still give it, she whispered. In your way. I try, he said, though sometimes I fail. She shook her head. You don't fail, she said. You protect, you guide. You give. He looked at her carefully, as if trying to see something in her eyes. And what about you, he asked. Do you still think I'm strange? She laughed softly, wiping a tear. Yes, she said. But now I know that your strangeness is just another way of loving. There was a silence between them. But it wasn't uncomfortable, it was full of meaning. Unspoken words shared truths. She reached out slowly and placed her hand over his. It was warm, rough and steady, just like him. I'm glad I met you, she said. He looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her. So am I, he replied, outside the ship. Stars drifted by like slow-moving fireflies. The station rotated silently in the vastness of space. But inside, a deep change had taken place. The walls that had once stood between them were falling away. She now saw him not as a human with strange habits, but as a soul shaped by hardship, who still chose to protect instead of destroy. He now saw her not as someone too soft or too emotional, but as someone strong enough to see past silence, past scars. They were different, but not distant anymore. Their worlds had collided, but instead of clashing, they had started to heal, and in that moment, they weren't just alien and human. They were simply two people, learning, growing, and finally trusting. The space station's main hall was glowing with celebration. Colorful lights hung from the ceiling. Music from 10 different species echoed through the chamber. It was Unity Day, a rare event where different species came together to share culture, food, and peace. The alien girl stood near the edge of the crowd, watching dancers spin in the center. She wore a soft blue cloak, traditional for her people, with a silver flower behind her ear. But her eyes searched for only one person. And then she saw him standing near the food tables, calm as always, quietly watching the crowd. The human. He hadn't dressed differently, still wearing his simple jacket and boots. He didn't dance, didn't sing, didn't laugh loudly like the others. But when he caught her eyes from across the room, he gave her a small nod, a simple gesture, but her heart skipped. She made her way through the crowd toward him, passing laughter, scents, and floating lights. The closer she got, the more her heart pounded, not with fear but with something deeper. This wasn't the same girl who had once cried over his strange ways. She had changed when she reached him. She smiled and held out a small fruit wrapped in her culture's ceremonial cloth. He looked at it, recognizing the meaning, an offering of love and unity from her people. But instead of taking it, he gently pushed it back toward her. You don't need to follow my ways, he said softly. I'm not, she replied, her voice shaking. I'm showing you I've learned yours. He paused, then slowly accepted the fruit with both hands. Around them, others noticed whispers floated in the air, aliens glancing and murmuring, some confused, some surprised, some even offended. In her culture, this act meant she had chosen someone to stand beside her, publicly, and she had chosen a human, one who didn't follow their traditions, one who walked silently while others danced. An elder from her people stepped forward, his face tight with concern. You give him the fruit, the elder asked. Even though he does not speak our language of love, the alien girl held her ground, her chin high. No, she said clearly. He speaks a different language, but I understand it now. He shows love not with words but with protection, she continued, her voice growing stronger. Not with flowers, but with actions. Not with songs, but with silence that stands by you when no one else does. The elder stared at her, then turned to the human, who simply nodded once. No big speech, no dramatic show. Just that quiet, powerful nod. The room fell silent, the music fading into the background. Everyone waited to see what would happen next, and then, something unexpected. The alien girl turned to the human and reached for his hand. Not just a polite touch, but a firm, loving grip. She held it high, showing everyone. I used to cry because I didn't understand his ways, she said loudly, tears forming in her eyes. But now I cry because I do. The audience stood in silence. Moved by the honesty in her voice, her tears weren't of pain anymore. They were tears of love, of learning, of deep respect. Tears that showed how far she had come and how deeply she had grown. The human didn't say anything, but his other hand moved up and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. For her people, that small action said more than 1,000 poems. For him, it was enough. She leaned into his shoulder, and for the first time, they both stood not as strangers, but as something more. Partners, companions, equals. The music slowly returned, softer now, gentler, and to everyone's surprise, the human took a small step forward. He didn't dance, but he extended his hand slightly toward her. She smiled through her tears and stepped beside him. They didn't move to the beat like others, but in their stillness there was something beautiful. The alien girl's people began to understand. Maybe love didn't always need to be loud or perfect or traditional. Maybe it could be quiet, awkward and strange, and still be real later. As the celebration continued, many came to greet them, some still confused, some curious, but many more inspired. The alien girl and the human stood together the whole time, their fingers always gently linked. When the night finally ended and they returned to their ship, she looked at him with soft eyes and whispered, "Your way of loving changed me." He looked at her the same way he always did, quiet and steady. "And yours changed me too," he replied. They stood there for a moment, two different souls from two different worlds, and yet nothing had ever felt more right. Her final tear rolled down, but she didn't wipe it away, because it was not a tear of confusion or fear. It was a tear of love.